Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he plans to move all Senate activity to pro forma sessions over the next 2 weeks. In a statement, he said previously scheduled floor activity will be rescheduled until after October 19th. He added that the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing for Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett will go forward on October 12th as originally planned. The statement comes as multiple Republican senators, including 2 on the Judiciary Committee, have now tested positive for COVID-19. CBSN political contributor Molly Hooper is joining us now to talk more about all of this. Molly, always good to see you. What is the reaction that we're seeing now on Capitol Hill to the president's hospitalization and the positive test results for multiple Republican senators?
Well, I think there's several different reactions. More to the point of the president's hospitalization, I think there's general concern, but my sources are saying, listen, if they hadn't moved the president to Walter Reed and he has COVID, that would just be an abdication of the medical professionals' authority. He has this great facility set up at Walter Reed. He's the president of the free world. Doctors need to monitor him and make sure that he is getting all the treatments he needs. He has access to all the machinery to get any kind of testing he needs to have done. Get him to Walter Reed. And there's also an outpouring just of concern that the president of the United States was able to get COVID-19. This is coming from Democrats and Republicans. I've seen some Democrats speaking out against individuals who have said sort of nasty things about the president and ill wishes towards the president with this disease. But overall, you're seeing a general concern for the president. In terms of, the contact tracing and individuals who have had access to the president, it's not just reserved to those Republican senators who've been down to the White House and the individuals who were there for the Amy Coney Barrett. I can't believe it was a week ago, big announcement at 5 p.m. last Saturday that she is his Supreme Court nominee. And, so we have seen those several individuals in the Republican Senate caucus. They've tested positive. Democrats, we haven't heard. Well, they haven't thus far, but the individuals who are down there, because Democrats have gone down to the White House in this past week to talk about China with various individuals on the administration staff, they've been tested as well. So there is a lot of concern, but I think the larger concern for members of the House and the Senate, and especially their staff, is that members of Congress do not have a blanketed COVID testing and tracing program in place. And that's because Leader McConnell and Speaker Pelosi in May said, no, we're not going to issue blanket-wide testing up here on Capitol Hill because we don't want to take those tests away from the frontline workers. Well, since then,
I think that's very surprising, Molly. Molly, I think that's very surprising to a lot of people to realize that these members of Congress and their staff have been going back and forth between Washington and their home states and not getting testing. I want to talk a little bit about Senator McConnell's statement that the confirmation hearing of Judge Barrett is expected to go forward as planned. 2 members of the Senate Judiciary Committee are now among the senators who have tested positive. Does this mean anything in particular for the hearing? And specifically, can the Judiciary Committee vote remotely to move her nomination to the floor?
Okay, to your last point. Voting remotely, it's a little tricky, and I don't think that they have established a way to move forward with that in place. So probably not. But here's the thing. Oh, the Senate and their procedures. In some cases, this helps them because usually what happens is after the committee has a hearing with a nominee, regardless of what position it is, there's usually a 1-week layover until the committee can actually vote on that nominee. So even when ACB is, as people are referring to, or Amy Coney Barrett's hearings go ahead next week or October 12th, week after next, there's still a lot of time between now and then for individuals who have become sick with COVID to essentially get it out of their body, for it to leave. Because usually we're hearing the duration is about 14 days, and you have to quarantine for a certain amount of time. But essentially, the hearings can go on and these senators can dial in. We've seen the remote hearings take place where just last week, James Comey appeared remotely and he took questions from senators, and he was at his home. And so that can happen with senators being remote and witnesses being remote. But in terms of the actual vote, in terms of the actual vote, that's a little more tricky. And it's something that Lindsey Graham would likely need to get an okay from his, ranking member, Dianne Feinstein, on. And I have a feeling she probably would not say yes to that. But they could vote.
Yeah,
I
want to ask, though, on... Just one second, Molly. I want to ask, though, a follow-up, because all of that, we know that the nomination to the Senate is supposed to take place on October 22nd. So that's all still possible within that 2-week time frame. But we know that Democrats had previously talked about the possibility of doing a sick out, not being there. And I wonder if, given the number of Republican senators that have now tested positive, if they are ill, if quorum becomes a potential strategy for the Democrats, who have said that they are opposed to the Republicans moving forward with this nomination so close to the election.
That could be a strategy. However, I have a feeling that Republicans will make sure that they show up and they are there, even if it means having to be in an antechamber away from everybody, keeping their masks on and not allowing anyone around them. The Republicans will show up for that vote. And again, as I said, these individuals, they have a lot of time to quarantine before now and then.
Molly, I want to also ask about the negotiations surrounding economic relief for people struggling due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The president tweeted earlier from the hospital calling for a stimulus deal. What is the latest? Are we likely to see a deal? Is there additional pressure now?
Well, there is additional pressure, and a lot of it's coming from Democrats in the Democratic caucus on Nancy Pelosi, because 18 of her members, they, in those moderate swing state districts, in the swing districts, they need a vote on this before the election. And so she's feeling a lot of pressure. Pelosi said that she's still engaging with Secretary of Treasury Mnuchin. They had a 65-minute call last night, essentially, to keep the conversation going. And even though the House is out of session and through the election, Leader Hoyer essentially gave members of the House a warning that they will have 24 hours notification before, being called back into session should an economic stimulus relief deal come into play. And Majority Leader McConnell also is bringing the Senate back in at least, by the 29th, if not sooner. So there is a possibility for Congress to come back in and vote. But as for whether that will happen, it's just unclear at this time. But the good news is Pelosi is engaging with the White House.
Good news for a lot of people who are waiting to hear about that stimulus deal. Molly, we've also been talking a lot about contact tracing over the past few days. What can you tell us about the precautions that have been taken on Capitol Hill to try and keep members of Congress and their staff safe throughout this pandemic? We have learned that it's actually pretty lax. Do you expect that there are new precautions, including a mandatory mask requirement now going forward?
Well, ever since Louis Gohmert, and that he's a Republican from Texas, got COVID, and I think that was in late July, Speaker Pelosi has instituted a mask mandate on Capitol Hill, or on the House side at least. So those precautions have taken on forward. But on the Senate, it's been, as you said, a little bit more lax. Well, I think one of the reasons that Leader McConnell is not having the Senate convene for the next 2 weeks is partially because, again, there aren't a lot of testing protocols up on Capitol Hill, even though the Office of the Attending Physician released a statement last night saying that any member who's been in contact with an individual who's had COVID, tested positive for COVID, can come get their testing. It's still not, there isn't a Capitol Hill-wide mandate for masks. And until there is, I think that we'll be hearing from staffers and members who are concerned about this.
I think that that's a really good point, because as you and I both know, even though members of Congress are not in session or are working remotely, there's still a lot of staff people, a lot of people who work at the Capitol who will still be there, and their health is just as much of a concern as the people who are elected to Congress. All right, Molly Hooper, thank you so much.
Thank you.